everybody queued in real quick here. Try to get it going fairly fast. We have U.S. Senator Gary Peters already on with us, and we're very excited, Senator, to have you join us. This is a great thing for us to be able to do. So looks like everybody's up and on. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to everyone U.S. Senator Gary Peters.
Great. Well, thank you. And it's good to be with all of you today. I appreciate having an opportunity to chat, to take some questions, but really, I really hope to have an opportunity to kind of hear what's on your mind too with small business. Clearly, we are in an incredibly challenging time for small business for the whole country, not just small businesses, but it's absolutely critical as we deal with this kind of simultaneous public health crisis and economic crisis that we make sure our small businesses survive, get through this. We all know that getting through this quickly and as safely as possible requires that small businesses survive, or the economy is not going to come back as quickly as any of us would like. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts as the challenges. So I know this is a kind of a question and answer period, but it's really important for me to hear directly from your members and from all of you as to what is important, particularly as we go into this next COVID issue, or I should say the next bill that we're going to be dealing with in the Senate that will hopefully be taken up. If not, won't be this week, but next week. Those negotiations are going to go into full form, and we hope to come out with some legislation that will then have to be balanced with what the House did as we go through the process. Let me just start off by saying a little bit about my involvement, though, dealing with the crisis. I am the ranking member on the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. So I oversee the Department of Homeland Security, which means I also oversee the Federal Emergency Management folks, FEMA, who are the ones responsible for the federal response to the COVID crisis. So that puts me intimately front and center with their efforts and trying to push those efforts forward to have a coordinated national response. We still have a long ways to go when it comes to that. But I have been involved with making sure we have personal protection equipment produced. Initially in the stages, as all of you know, Michigan was particularly hard hit. We were a hot spot and had to deal with a large number of cases. And we were just scrambling at the beginning to make sure we had enough personal protection equipment to, first off, just protect our frontline workers, particularly our healthcare professionals who are in the front line in the hospitals. And the fact that they were not able to get adequate protection even through the height of it was a challenge. And that also included test supplies to make sure that we have test supplies to do the kind of testing necessary to know who's sick and who's not. We still have a ways to go on that. Capacity is stretched right now, and right now, unfortunately, it's taking way too long to get back these test results from labs. When we're pushing to get that to be done in a more efficient way than is happening right now. I was just up in Traverse City last week talking to the folks at the Munson Healthcare Center, and they're saying it takes several days if they can't produce it, do it in their own hospital, and they're limited because their testing supplies, they figure the testing supplies that they have, they'll run out in the next couple of weeks, which has them extremely worried. And they're starting to see some cases pick up in northern Michigan. And according to the folks there, part of it is, as tourists come in from around the country, that has an impact on cases that they're going to be seeing in northern Michigan. They're very concerned about running out of those supplies. And then when they send it out, it takes a matter of sometimes a week before they can get results. And it's very difficult if you have a patient in your hospital and you don't know for a week exactly what the diagnosis is and the kind of actions that they have to take. And then you think as businesses, if you've got folks that need to be tested and they're out of work for a week while they're waiting for a test, that's simply unacceptable. So we have a lot more work to do in that area. The other area that I've focused a lot of attention on is supply chain to make sure that we are actually making these critical supplies in the United States. That's a big part of the problem that we have right now is that we are dependent on foreign sources for most critical medical supplies. I actually put out a report last year out of the Homeland Security Committee where we looked at drug shortages and the reason for those shortages. And the fact is that when you think of all the drugs that we use in this country, the beginning chemicals, the precursors, the chemicals that underlie all of those drugs over 80% comes from foreign sources, nearly all of it from China. We are just so dependent on China for critical supplies. And now you add mask, surgical mask, cotton swabs that we've had a shortage of to do the testing, just the basic swabs you use to collect a sample in the nasal passage. We only have one manufacturer in the United States that makes that, so we're dependent on Chinese. And of course, in a pandemic, everybody's all going to the same source trying to buy it. In fact, after the report came out, I talked extensively as to saying when we have a pandemic in this country, we're going to be put in a pretty precarious situation. Little did I know, just a few months later, here we are in a pandemic, and we are in that situation right now. So we have to take back that production. I've got legislation I've been working on to do that. It'll be a focus, and it's really tied to the work that I do as a member of the Armed Services Committee overseeing the U.S. military, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the supply chain for our defense industry. We have tremendous contributions here in Michigan for the defense industry. I hope to expand that even further. But when you think about supplies for national defense, we make sure we make it in America. I mean, just think, I served in the U.S. Navy Reserve, and I use this example. We do not buy U.S. Navy warships from China. We don't do that. We don't have them make our warships. We make sure we have shipyards here in America that build warships and have that industrial capacity. Here in Michigan and on the border with Ohio, we have a shipyard that made the littoral combat ship for the U.S. Navy with Michigan workers. We have the M1 Abrams tanks, equipment for the Army. We make in Michigan and Ohio and other places are key parts of that. And if we look at that from national defense, we have to look at critical supplies for healthcare in the same way. The life-saving supplies, we have to make sure that we have that onshore. And those are, a lot of them are all small businesses that we can bring back to continue to develop the supply base in this country, and something that I am continuing to work on. And I see that as great opportunities for us, especially when you talk about manufacturing. Manufacturing represents 20% of our GDP in Michigan. We're the second highest in the country, and a focus on manufacturing is good for Michigan, it's good for America, and it's something that I have worked on and will continue to work on in the future. So with that, I think we should probably go to some questions.
Excellent. Well, the first question is on a lot of our minds, not just the person who brought this question to us, but how are we going to safely get our children back to school here this fall and start educating them?
Yeah, well, I think, we all want to get our children back to school this fall. That's everybody wants to see that happen. We want to make sure it's safe, but we want to make sure that they get back. We don't want people to get behind in their education, and it's tough, although we're moving to online. There's some issues related to that I'll mention, but having people, or our students and our young people, back in school is really important. We don't want to have a lag in that education. So hopefully that'll happen. It'll have to happen, though, in a safe way, and I would hope that we're guided by science as to how we do it as safely as possible. I've had conversations with school officials across the state over the last few weeks, just last week with some of the superintendents of some of the larger intermediate school districts around the area too, as to how we do that. I can say they are thinking it through in a very comprehensive way. How do you maintain the kind of social distancing, for example, necessary? And clearly that's a lot more difficult in elementary schools than other schools, but every grade has got its own unique set of challenges. But just if you're looking at separation in a school, the buildings aren't big enough normally to accommodate the students that go to those. They're not designed for the kind of social distancing that epidemiologists say we need. That's not how a school is designed. People are a lot closer to each other and sitting in those classrooms. So how do you spread folks out? So they're thinking, how do you maybe use gymnasiums and cafeterias, those big open spaces? How do you turn those into classrooms? How do you separate them? I mean, this is clearly a very complex issue. Even getting students to school, so they'll have to be made accommodations. I had one superintendent, one of the districts said that they have 110 buses, but to maintain social distancing on a bus, I think he said you would need well over 250 buses in order to accomplish it. So you can't use the bus system like you did before, so that means parents driving. I mean, there's just going to be a lot of changes that folks will have to take a look at, and the cost associated with that. So Obviously, we have to do this based on the science and what the epidemiologists say to protect our children. I don't think any of us want to see children at risk, and we don't want children going back to their families and their parents and grandparents and others and putting those families at risk too. So it's serious. So I hope we can get there. I support getting there, but we're going to have to do it in a thoughtful way, driven by science. And my hope is that this is not driven by politics. Politics has no place in public health. Public health is public health, and we should all embrace that aspect of it and not let politics get in the way.
Thank you, Senator. Next question. What government support, what government program would you want to most emphasize to small businesses that are really on the razor's edge of making it or not making it?
Well, I think right now in dealing with the COVID, one of the most important aspects of that is the Paycheck Protection Plan, the PPP program that came through the SBA, something that I worked on aggressively. That program has been vital, and it's likely we're going to have to revisit and try to continue to support it going forward. If the COVID crisis doesn't go away as quickly as any of us would like, that means we're going to have to focus on additional assistance to small businesses. As I mentioned in the opening, there's no way this economy can possibly recover quickly if our small businesses don't survive. All of you are the engine of growth that drive our economy. We've got to make sure that is available. So if we look at the initial money that came out of the PPP program, I was concerned about how some of that went out, and it went out to businesses that were not necessarily the ones that were the hardest hit as a result of the COVID crisis. We're continuing to do oversight on that. Oversight's really important. I want to make sure taxpayer money is spent efficiently and properly and according to congressional intent. As I mentioned, the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, in addition to Homeland Security, we're Government Affairs, which means we're the top oversight committee for the Senate and provide oversight of federal money. And I work closely with the Republican chair, Ron Johnson, out of Wisconsin. We have a great working relationship. We work on a bipartisan basis. In fact, a lot of the oversight language in the CARES Act was written by me and Ron. Together, we wrote that oversight language because this is a bipartisan issue for me. We've got to make sure this is done properly. And we've been asking for more information from the SBA. We're starting to get that to do the kind of oversight. And I raise all this is because those businesses that are on the razor edge that you mentioned are the ones that definitely need help. We don't have unlimited federal money. That's not unlimited. We have to be very careful as to how we spend it, and we should be spending it in a way where the need is the greatest. And if you look at that first tranche that went out, we often had folks who were really good customers with banks, so we're at the front of the list, and people who were not as good were at the back. And folks who were not as good a customer of the bank, probably just because they're smaller entities, they don't have as much banking business because they're small, but they're the ones that were very vulnerable. It was also problematic when that first money went out for Michigan. Here in Michigan, we are the 10th largest state in the country in terms of population, and yet we rank 35 out of 50 in terms of money that came into our state from the administration. That was wrong. We needed to correct that. We corrected it in the second tranche, made some improvements. A major improvement was to set aside money for small financial institutions that are in underserved areas where small businesses may not have the same kind of access to capital. And I say underserved areas, that would be some urban areas, but also our rural areas. Our rural areas across the state simply did not get the resources necessary to support those small businesses. So we have to carve that out to make sure that those businesses on the edge in those areas have resources. We put $70 billion we carved out for minority depository institutions, for CDFIs, for credit unions, smaller community banks that are in our local communities. We need to keep putting money into or making sure they have the resources they need to lend to their small businesses. And we're going to have to continue that. The other aspect that I worked on dealt with unemployment insurance and the expansion of eligibility to people who wouldn't normally qualify for unemployment insurance under the system, and that includes small business owners that can now get unemployment. It's actually the Pandemic Assistance Act is my legislation that I wrote that was put into the CARES Act, modeled after what we do after other natural disasters. But it makes sure independent contractors, small business owners, if you're an Uber driver and suddenly you don't have any business, you need help to put food on the table and keep a roof over your head. And so it expanded that. And there are a lot of small business owners. I've heard from small business owners all across the state who are saying, their business completely dried up. They work for themselves. They have 3 or 4 employees, and they were in serious trouble. And so that has been a lifeline for them. And we've got to be focused on these lifelines going forward. So a long answer, but a really important question is what people are really dealing with. And that will hopefully be a part of what we're going to be dealing with going forward in this next package that we'll start negotiating in the next, or now negotiate, but hopefully start moving something out in the next couple of weeks.
Excellent, thank you. Long answer, but obviously a very difficult situation. The next question has to do with a term that's out there that has been confusing or maybe misunderstood, and maybe you can help shed some light on it. It's the meaning of defund the police and what those reforms mean, and maybe a little information from you on your stance on that.
Well, I believe we must fund our police. I'm a strong supporter of having strong and vibrant law enforcement in our communities. It's important. That funding is primarily local funding, so it's local communities determine the funding that their police departments and law enforcement folks need. But police do have a valuable function in our society. The overwhelming majority of folks in law enforcement are heroic individuals that put themselves at risk and are out there in our community, and we need to support them. However, obviously, there are reforms that we should put in place given the incidents we have seen, unfortunately, all too often in places around the country. But there's some common sense things that we can do to deal with issues that we have seen arisen, like certainly the murder of George Floyd. I don't think anybody in this country who saw that image would not be changed by it in some way and understand that we need to make sure that we're addressing those issues. So common sense things that I support, for example, chokeholds. There's no reason that we have chokeholds. Many police departments all across the country have already banned chokeholds. That should be widespread. We need to have enhanced training to make sure that our police officers have the professional training necessary for them to handle what are at times very difficult situations. We need to expand community policing. Community policing has been used very effectively in some departments across the country, where you build trust in a community by making sure that your police officers know the community, know the individuals in the community, and equally, if not more important, the community knows them. So I've introduced legislation, for example, the Community Policing Act, which will deal with another issue. Many of our police departments are having a hard time recruiting folks right now. Being a police officer is a really hard job, and it's hard to recruit folks there. And they'd also like to recruit folks from the community. If you're going to do community policing, if you have people who live in the community, have grown up in the community, have lived there a long time, that takes you a long way down that road. So the legislation I've introduced, which is bipartisan, I'm working with Senator Cornyn, a Republican from Texas, the two of us. Right now, this legislation has the support of all the many major law enforcement groups, as well as the civil rights groups, the NAACP and Urban League and others. But basically, it'll allow local departments to recruit from within their community. It'll provide a grant to help or to pay for police academy, for criminal justice courses, to get their degree, to get into law enforcement. The stipulation is that they have to stay in the community and they have to stay there 4 years. And if they stay there 4 years, then that cost of training is covered. And from what I've learned in talking to police departments across the state of Michigan, most police chiefs think if someone stays there 4 years, they're going to stay there a whole lot longer too. So, this is about building a force from help recruiting and building the force from within our communities to serve our community. So I think there are a number of things that we need to do. We can do it quickly. They're common sense. And we support our police force, but also make sure that they're serving the community in a way that has the trust of the community.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Next question. And you've been serving since, I believe, 1991. And thank you so much for everything you've done. In all that time, what's your proudest accomplishment? Some great things you've been able to be a part of for our country.
Yeah, well, those are back in my state senate days, and then I took a break from public service during that time too, but or at least elective office, I should say. I took a break from elected office. There's a lot over that time period, but I just we're in a crisis situation now, so I'm sure when I reflect back on the work that I've been doing here, we'll have a different story. But when I first got elected to Congress was in 2008, 2009, right in the financial crisis that was hitting our country then. If you recall, it led to the Great Recession, and we were on the verge of potentially losing our auto industry, which would have been catastrophic. And I was immersed in that issue. The congressional district that I represented, which was in Oakland County, included Chrysler, the Chrysler headquarters in Chrysler. And as you know, we were in a situation where we were afraid that both General Motors and Chrysler would go out of business. There was talk about perhaps helping General Motors, but not Chrysler. And yet Chrysler is a massive employer in my district, but all throughout the state, clearly. And I will never forget the meeting I had with Mr. Nardelli and some of his key folks during that crisis. And he basically said to me, that, Senator, I want you to be clear, we're in a really difficult financial situation here. And we can't, all the credit markets, the banks are all frozen. No one's lending any money. He goes, so I can't go into bankruptcy because I won't be able to get the money to emerge from bankruptcy. He goes, I'm literally just a few weeks away from liquidating this company, liquidating it, just having it all completely disappear. And, and I looked around the audience, there was a fair number of people there, and the looks on their face, I don't think they heard the CEO say that they were going to be liquidated in a matter of a few weeks. I mean, the look on their face, like here's their life changing dramatically. And those of you who know the Chrysler headquarters, it's a massive facility, massive parking lot. I just had these visions of being abandoned and grass growing in the parking lot and all those lives that are shattered. And so I really leaned really heavily with the Obama administration, others, to make sure that Chrysler was a part of that rescue package because it would have been catastrophic. And luckily that was. They were. And I'm so very pleased that went through and it was successful in order to keep that company going and so many jobs in Southeast Michigan. In fact, I was probably what was really great was then after all of that, I had a huge town hall meeting with folks at Chrysler, and Sergio, the new CEO of Chrysler, actually said if it wasn't for my efforts in being a real champion, that company may never have survived. So I feel good about that. And there's a long list of other things that we could talk about, but I think making sure the auto industry continues to be a part of Michigan is something that is something I'll always remember as it was a battle for so many of us and so critical for our state and quite frankly for our country.
Well, and we appreciate it. And there's so much our legislative leadership does behind the scenes. So we appreciate all that. I know we're getting close to the end of our time. Any final comments for the group?
Well, no, I just appreciate we had the questions. I'd love to hear from your folks too. So I think Nicole is on the call here from my regional director. Please let me know as we get into people here on the call are familiar with the PPP program and some of the programs that have been out. I'm sure everybody has some concerns or either good stories or bad. We want to know what those are so that we can make sure we make it better as we go forward. I think there needs to be additional assistance for small business and look forward to having a chance to work with your members to chart a path that's most beneficial and allows us to get through this. And obviously, the only way we get through this is if we work together. Try to take off any of our partisan hats, and we can't be political about this. It drives me crazy. We're in the middle of a national crisis. This should be driven by science. It should be driven by good management principles. It should be just thinking through how we get through this united as a country. And I'm confident when we do that, we're going to get on the other side and we're going to be even stronger than we were before we started.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you.
U.S. Senator Gary Peters, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Take care. Everybody stay healthy, stay safe.